Hey everyone, how's it going? I hope you're all doing great, as I always say, staying happy and healthy and all that good stuff. And in this video, I have quite a few really cool encounters, and they are of course from all over the place, ones from Madagascar even. So, if that sounds like something you're interested in, definitely pull up a stump with me, and let's jump into it. Thank you for watching. This happened back when I was a recruit in the army. It's the weekend, and I'm tasked with watching over our quarters for 24 hours. I have to keep all the doors open so the patrolling sergeant can come inside and check the armory. It's around 7 p.m. when another guy comes in. He never explains why he's there, does nothing at all except talk to me for like 3 hours. This dude is usually honestly a dumbass who can barely count to 10, but now he's almost super intelligent. He's in a deep philosophical debate with me, like he's Plato or something. After like 3 hours, he suddenly cuts the conversation and simply leaves without saying a thing. This is weird, but nothing that scared me or set me off. Come Monday, I ask him what that was all about. He looks at me strangely, confused, and says that he hasn't been there all weekend. He shows me pictures of him at dinner with his girlfriend. We go to the guard post and check the logbook. He was, indeed, never there. I had a 3-hour conversation with something, maybe a doppelganger, maybe a skinwalker, or maybe something else. Nobody ever wanted to do that same job ever again, which is not helped by the fact that we were forced to do it, though nothing like that happened to anyone else. Even though everybody was on edge, I had plenty of paranormal stuff happen to me in that place. This one night, I was driving home from a late shift at work. The moon is out. It's still a very dark night. I live roughly 30 miles outside of town with my cousin, so I'm driving along the interstate for some of the trip. Then I take my turn and I start the last part of the drive. It's 12 miles of dirt road that leads back into the woods. I only have 2 neighbors who live right next to the road that I'm on, and then no one for 12 miles. I am about maybe halfway home when I come around a bend going maybe 35, and I see some bright object crossing the road. I swerve just enough to avoid hitting it. I have no idea what it was, but it was very small. I replay making that turn and seeing the object a couple of times in my head. I get curious and turn around. I come around the corner and I see the object resting on the opposite side of the road, totally still. It's a toy. I get out and approach the toy. The forest is totally dark, totally quiet. It's still around 5 miles from home, 7 miles from the main road and the nearest neighbor. It is a plastic toy train, just the engine portion of the train. I play with the wheels and wonder how it got out here. I turn the toy over and I see a dial. I give it a twist. It's a wind-up toy. I remember that this was rolling across the road. I drop the toy and begin to walk backwards to my car, too scared to turn around. As I'm backing up, my butt bumps into the door, and I scare the hell out of myself. I stand there for a minute, trying to catch my breath, to settle down. Then, I catch eyes off in the darkness. Before I can properly investigate, I hear something scream off down the road, and then I hear plodding, like something running on all fours. I turn and get in my car, and I haul ass home. I never saw the toy again, but my cousin 100% believed me and just said, "Yeah, I've seen some weird things out there too." I have experienced many things throughout my 61 years. That leaves me seeking the missing puzzle pieces in an attempt to make sense of it all. My apologies for its length. I don't know how to tell a short story. When I was 5 years old, 1966, I had contracted rheumatic fever. It set in rapidly. It began in my spine and then rapidly spread to every joint in my little body. The doctor came to our home. In those days, they made house calls. The doctor began to examine me, and when he touched my swollen knees, I screamed. My older sister, who was 9 at the time, bit the doctor and told him to stop hurting me. The doctor demanded that my parents get me to the hospital immediately, and he would meet us there. On the way, I was delirious. I asked my dad where we were going. He told me we were going to the hospital, but I heard, "We're going to Grandma's." He swore to me that he told me the truth. I was hospitalized for 2 months, as the nature of this malady was extreme. I almost died from it. The staff had even told my parents to mentally prepare for the possibility that I may not make it. Every joint in my little body had swollen to triple its normal size, and it was excruciating. Think gout on steroids times 10. With this malady, because everything swells, the hospital was very concerned that my heart may get damaged. At one point, I had an oxygen tent erected around my bed. As I began to heal, one thing the hospital staff took great care in was monitoring and maintaining my body temperature. It had to be kept at a constant level. They were most concerned about any exposure to cold and my temperature dropping. They carried me to the bathroom so my feet wouldn't come into contact with the coldness of the floor. A month into our stay, while my roommate was at physio, I had a visitor. It was a little boy, about 4 years old. He had very black hair, unnaturally big, very dark brown, almost black eyes, and also an unnaturally large, somewhat disturbing grin. He entered my room and stood beside my bed. He just stood there, grinning from ear to ear, literally. I made an attempt to engage in conversation with him. I said, "Hello," and "Who are you?" He said nothing. He just stood there and grinned. I began to get an uneasy feeling as to why he was there. As I was only 5 years old, I didn't understand why he wasn't saying anything. Then he proceeded to grab the water and ice pitcher kept beside every bedside in the hospital in those days and dumped the entire pitcher of ice water onto me and then bolted from the room. The ice water, wherever it landed on my body, was like I was being stabbed with freezing cold knives. Of course, I screamed, and the head nurse came running. When she caught the play as to what had happened, she called in 4 more nurses. They stripped my bed and me and dried us both off, and proceeded to replace the sheets and my pajamas in what seemed like seconds. The whole time they were doing this, the head nurse was chastising me for doing this to myself, citing that I did it for attention. The whole time, I screamed and cried that it was a little boy. She didn't believe me. Of course, they had to relay this occurrence to my parents so they could, quote, have a talk with me, and so that I understood not to do this again. This one act could have killed me. When my parents had this talk with me, I was adamant that it was this little boy who had come into my room and had done this. My parents were inclined to believe me, as I was one of those kids that couldn't tell a lie. If I ever attempted it, I would smile or giggle, and they would know that I was making an attempt to lie. From my absolute conviction when relaying my story and no evidence whatsoever of humor, they believed me. My father spoke with the head nurse again, relaying that they believed that I didn't do this to myself, that it was in fact a little boy, and that he ought to be reprimanded. The head nurse told my father, "It couldn't have been a little boy. There are no little boys admitted to the children's ward or in the hospital at all." As this was 1966, children weren't allowed to visit in our hospitals. I remember a nurse carrying me to the window so I could see my brothers and sisters on the grass below waving up at me. So then, who was this little boy? Why didn't he say a word? Why did he dump the ice water on me? And how did he disappear so quickly? And that was sent in by Nadine, so thank you for sending that one in, and I hope I could do it justice. Back in 2011, I went to Madagascar to visit my wife's family. They live way out in this place called, I hope I'm spelling it right, Mangatabohangi, in the middle of nowhere. Their house sits on top of this small hill. The entire land around it for miles is surrounded by mini mountains, plateaus, tiered step hills that have dirt stairs built into them, all kinds of weird things. Their fields are full of wheat and tall grass. My wife is talking to her mother. Her father decides it's time to have a talk with me and brings along Grandpa too. Grandpa is old and frail from decades of farming that he's done. He requires a cane to get around, but instead, he holds onto my arm the whole time that we are outside walking around. All three of us are standing there talking about the garden. Grandpa's talking about how his tomatoes turned out perfect this year. I see this guy just walking through the field, completely out of place. He's clad in this raggedy clothing, like he's been set on fire. His skin is black and charred, falling off. His arms are straight down, and he's jerking around like those Iron Maiden monsters from Resident Evil 4. If you've played the game, you'll know what I mean. I ask her dad if he knows who this is, or if it's normal for people to cross the field like this. He says no, nobody ever does this, and he knows everyone in the community, but this person's a stranger. The coal man, is what we called him, stops and turns to look at us from 200 yards away. He turns his whole torso instead of just his head. The dad goes inside and comes back out with an MAS-36. We leave Grandpa in his chair on the porch, and we go down to see if this coal man needs some discipline. The coal man's walking slowly. We get 20 yards and we call out to him, asking if he needs help. Why is he out here? He turns his whole body and screams like a banshee. The dad aims at him, but before the bullet even hits, he takes off. He dodged a bullet, and the last thing we see of him is this person bounding up through the wheat fields at an obscene speed. I heard again a little while later that they talked to some people in the community, and other people had seen him too. The coal man is kind of now like a local legend. I live near a pretty big shopping mall, and right outside of it is this massive park and many acres of forest that are dotted with lakes, all of which are connected. In fact, there was one of them which was pretty close to the play parks. Now this thing was massive, and they used to let you hire paddle boats until they kept getting sunk. So, I have two stories for you. Both happened to me. When I was just a kid, maybe 8 to 10 years old. My grandparents are playing with me at the play park while my parents do some shopping. I make friends with this boy that I can't remember the name of, so I'll call him L for the sake of this. Me and L are on this big spiderweb dome thing that's around 50 feet high at the very top. We're both pansies about it, so we don't go above 10 feet. Now L had a brother who was younger than us, but he climbed all the way to the top, wasn't scared of heights at all. And then he shouts down to us and tells us that there's a monster in the lake. Al looks up and tells him monsters don't exist, despite his brother insisting that he saw one in the lake. Al's brother says that it's watching a little boy. Me and Al are like, whatever, and we move on to the swings. When my parents finish shopping and are walking me home, they see police by the lakeside. When we ask, they tell us that a little boy fell in and never resurfaced. Divers and stuff searched for him for days, but never found anything. So 2 years later, I'm on one of the hired paddle boats. I'm paddling along with my mother and my uncle when suddenly we can't move. The paddle boat makes this god-awful scraping sound and refused to move. My uncle thought that maybe we just got caught on some weeds, so he sticks his hand in and moves it around. He turns, white as a sheep, and tells us to get away from the sides of the boat. We oblige. 10 or 15 minutes later, there's a couple big waves right under us, and then something shoots through the water and nearly capsizes our little boat. My uncle rows us back like a Viking in a matter of a couple minutes. The tour boat guys asked us if we were okay. We said yes, but my uncle said that we got stuck on something. They refunded our money and asked us not to tell anyone. I never really believed any stories that I read until some stuff happened in my own life and I started making some connections. I swear this is all true, but you don't have to believe me. I just kind of wanted to talk about it. I live in Pennsylvania, just outside the city of Reading. There's a lot of thick forest around here, but nothing ridiculous, and it's mostly suburbs where I am. Further out, it's highways and farmland. Lucky for me, I live right up at the edge of a small community at the very top of a hill. The forest is literally across the street from me. Somewhere around a year or two ago, my dad and I were outside having a personal chat about some recent tough events going on in my household, when suddenly we heard a weird sound in the forest across the road. We both stopped and looked over. I didn't think deer came out this late, I think I said. My dad just stared and looked kinda confused. Then we heard someone yell something like, "Help, I'm bleeding." We both sat there, staring into the woods where it came from. My dad stood up and told me to go inside. We both rushed in. I watched him run upstairs to grab his handgun. My dad's a rough sort of guy and always heads for his gun if he thinks that something is about to go down. Something definitely was going down. I opened our back door again to our deck. It was a glass door, and peeked out toward the forest just to see if anyone would come sprinting out or something. Keep in mind, we're at the edge of the suburbs and not exactly used to hearing people scream bloody murder in the middle of the night. Then I heard it. This loud, weird screech. It was like a cat or a woman, but like some kind of mix in between the two. It was weird. It was high-pitched, but not. I didn't feel like it was human. It filled the entire neighborhood for a full 10 seconds before it cut off and went silent. I slammed the glass door shut and ran to the stairs just in time to see my dad stomping down in boots with his pistol. "Did you hear that?" I remember asking him. He just nodded, and we both head out the front. By now, a bunch of our neighbors were coming outside too. The scream was really loud, but I didn't expect all these people to come out this late. It was nearly midnight. My dad went down the street and looked up at the forest. Another guy came up to my dad and had some kind of handgun as well. I watched them start chatting for a bit, until suddenly another one of those screams pierced the air again. It was horrible and gave me a pit in my stomach. It went on for something like maybe another 10 seconds, and again suddenly cut off. Like the idiots that my dad and this random neighbor guy were, they decided to point their guns toward the forest and headed in. I couldn't believe it. I mean, my dad is a hunter, and he's been doing that since he was a kid. He's almost 40 at this time. But I'd be damned if I'd ever do something like that. They must have been in the forest for a good 20 minutes together, searching the darkness for God knows what. I sat outside with a bunch of neighbors that entire time, staring into the forest and waiting. Eventually, they came back just fine. They stuck together the entire time, according to my dad, and I thought they saw something, like a tall guy, in the forest at some point. They said he was lanky and looked naked. When they tried to see if he was the one that was screaming, apparently, he got down on all fours and hauled ass into the forest. We were all pretty shaken up, but parted ways and headed back to our houses. It was pretty weird, and no police or anything ever checked it out, but eventually we all moved past it. A long while after that, there was a separate incident that I didn't exactly connect to the first. Later that year, I was sitting outside with my friends on my back porch. We were talking and having a grand old time, just screwing around, when I saw my cat Jinx pawing at the glass window. "What a stupid cat," my friend said. I agreed with him and played with the cat, putting my finger on the window while he pawed at my finger wherever it went. That's not what was weird though. Later that night, I was in my room playing a game with my window open. My cat was somewhere in the house along with our dogs, doing pet stuff, I guess, so I know he was fine. It's important to note that my neighborhood has a real problem with stray cats though. Anyway, I was sitting there playing some games with my window open when I heard what sounded like a cat meowing outside. I paused my game, wondering if Jinx had gotten outside, and I went to my window to listen. I heard that meow again, but it was a long, deep one, the kind you hear from a cat when they're pissed and backed into a corner with their claws out. I recognized it wasn't my cat, but it was still coming from the woods behind my house, so I stared into them and tried to see where the stray cat was and what it was getting so mad at. The cat did that deep, long, angry meow again, and it sounded sort of close to my actual yard. I heard some shuffling in the woods, and then something weird happened. I thought I could hear someone talking, except it wasn't a normal person's voice. It was like in those movies when someone's acting insane and the way they're talking, like mimicking themselves almost really badly. It was something like "stupid cat," but really elongated. I got immediately creeped out, but seeing as how my window was on the second floor, I felt safe to keep listening. Then I realized the voice was changing. It said it again. It sounded like someone was trying to sound like my friend, but doing it really badly. Then there was a serious scuffle of some kind. I heard twigs breaking and the cat just going apeshit. I mean, it was really screeching and meowing like it was fighting for life or death. Then there was this loud thumping sound, like something big and heavy smacking against something else that was solid. After that, the meowing stopped completely, and whatever was out there went dead silent. I was pretty creeped out by this point. I shut my window, and I had trouble sleeping that night. There hasn't been a whole lot to happen since, aside from one incident in particular, where I was getting a drink late one night, and I thought I saw someone crouching really super low on my back porch, looking into my glass door. Like, I saw the light reflect off their eyes, like when you see an animal at night. The door was locked, and it really freaked me the hell out and made me sprint to my room and wake up my dad. He went out, and he didn't find anyone or anything, but he didn't doubt that it actually happened. I've never heard of something like this happening in my area, nor has much happened since then, so I don't really know. So, what'd you think of those? Let me know which one was your favorite one down in the comments. Do you have one of your own? I have an email in the description below that you can send them to if you want to. I also have a PayPal and a Patreon down there as well, but no pressure for that. And my thought at the end of the one from Reading, Pennsylvania, when he said that he was going to go get a drink and he saw it at the back porch door, what I thought of was, that's why I keep a water bottle in my room. The first reason is to stay hydrated. The second is that so I don't have to participate in whatever stuff is going on outside at 3 o'clock in the morning. But, anyways, yeah, let me know which one was your favorite one. And with that, I thank you for pulling up a stump. Stay hydrated, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you for watching.